monitor.
Come a little closer and lend me your ears. Don't worry, you keep yours while I keep mine.
In each episode, we'll dig into the major stories, uncover the truth, and retrieve gems from Yada's blog.
We'll discuss what's right, bark about what's wrong, wag our tails at the thrill of discovery, and take you on adventures through the exciting world we live in today. So, fasten your curiosity leash and get ready.
Right then, coming to you with another episode of the Yada's Vlog on a Blog. Tomorrow's news, disseminated today. Let's dive in.
Well, as you can see, it's a dog's life here. As we overlook the Caribbean Sea, it's a beautiful day in the Virgin Islands, and I'm happy to be able to continue our presentation of the 10th Mizmowr, written by none other than King Dowd. And this handsome fellow here is Wookiee. I am Yada. And as we continue, what we find is Dowd revealing that Yahowah, which is God's one and only name, it is properly pronounced for you using God's own information that he made available to us so that we would know how to convey his name. It's based upon the verb haya, which means to exist, which explains how to pronounce 3 of the 4 letters in Yahowah. And we find that instruction in his Torah guidance. The O from Torah comes from the Wah. So it is Yahowah, and the beloved son writes, Yahowah reigns by guiding Melech as king in charge, providing advice and counsel, direction and support forever as an eternal witness to the restoring testimony. It is interesting here to note that not only is Yahowah God's one and only name, that the title that Yahowah uses to establish his authorization for Dowd, our beloved king, to rule is Melech. And Melech is really just one letter shy of Malach, where Malach means messenger, envoy, representative, who is conveying something essential by way of a communique. And so Malach and Melech being very similar words in Hebrew, we know that sovereignty and kingship is very much conveyed through guidance, advice, and counsel, and that we should recognize the responsibility that Yahowah has instilled in that title, Melech. And this is going to occur forever. Now, forever is an interesting word in Hebrew, olam. It's always perceived to be forever into the future. But olam actually speaks of the past. And so it says that God's reign, influenced by guiding, by communicating his advice and counsel, has been from the very beginning and will continue throughout futurity. So it is time without end, going both backwards and forwards, and that he is establishing Yahowah in the model that we are to follow, that Yahowah is the ultimate Ad, which is the restoring witness to the eternal testimony. God said here that Goyim, the Gentile institutions, and even individuals, countries, cultures, societies, governments, belief systems will be expelled and cease to exist. Yisra'el is for the Israelites. Now, that doesn't mean that there can be no Goyim in Yisra'el, because a Goy can be annexed into Yisra'el. We can be grafted into Yisra'el. Yisra'el is actually a very descriptive term, as are most Hebrew words. It means that it describes someone who exists and endures with God, who is enabled such that they continue to endure with God. It means to be empowered by God, is what Yisra'el actually conveys. And so it is possible to be among those who continue. But what will happen is that those who are Muslims and Christians and socialist, secular humanists, the Marxists that have become so anti-Semitic here over the years, they will all be expelled. In fact, they will all be annihilated. They will cease to exist from within his land and earth. Now, there are, as I have said, going to be, excuse me, a small remnant of Goyim who will be particularly important to the future of the land. They will be brought in to work as laborers. And while that has become a pejorative in today's world, when you think of work and labor, it isn't to God. He wants all of us to engage, to work. He works. He wants us to work. If we cease working, we cease to be of value to anyone. So it is his land. It is his home. It is even his planet and universe. And he conceived all life within it. And as such, he is entitled to include or expel whomever he sees fit or unfit to live in it. And this would be the same thing with Shamayim, with heaven. And it is in our interest to know that. God has 5 conditions for participation in his covenant family and entrance into Shamayim, heaven. You can either agree with them and capitalize upon them or not, but you will endure the consequence one way or the other. So the ability to participate in the covenant and become part of God's family is the most compelling reason for us to disassociate from Gentile influences, from their nations, institutions, religions, and politics. Doing so is actually a prerequisite. And it is yet another thing that going to cause Goyim to be driven away and destroyed during the last days, because they aren't going to walk away from them. Call it Yahweh's one-state solution, if you will. People for peace, and ridding his land of the worst religious and political antagonists. I read a rabbinical post that was, from this great sage to say that that it is not possible to be Jewish without practicing Judaism. And he actually claimed that in the Torah, they were all believers. Therefore, it wasn't possible to be Jewish according to the Torah without Judaism. You just write these absolute idiots back. I mean, it's astonishingly astonishing how stupid one has to be a rabbi. The fact is that the single most prevalent theme throughout the Torah is that the children of Yisra'el were antagonistic, they were belligerent, they were arrogant, and they were malcontents. And their single worst proclivity was being religious. And every one of them who expressed their religiosity was actually killed by God. And so the truth is, yes, there were a lot of religious Israelites during the Exodus. And rather than embracing them and say, oh boy, you're a believer, you must be Jewish. No, God says, you're a believer, you're toast. I want nothing to do with you. So it just shows just how awful, how ignorant Judaism has become. Well, there will be, based on this prophetic statement, no Palestinians or other Muslims, no Roman Catholics or other Christians, no communists or other Marxists or progressive protesters, no conspirators or other anti-Semites. The only question remaining for these corrupting influences is whether, after being expelled, they will also be exterminated, as if they were rats carrying the plague. But either way, separated from Yahweh and his people, they will soon die. God's not going to allow anybody that is toxic, that is poisoned with religion, politics, conspiracy, militarism, anti-Semitism, collectivism into his home as he transforms the earth back into the conditions of Eden. Now, for those of us who were Goy by birth, this prophetic assessment should underscore the merit of being adopted into Yahweh's covenant family, of walking away from politics and religion, militarism and conspiracy, and of being grafted into the tree of lives by way of the tree of knowledge. The less goyim that stains us, the better. The more we grow to reflect the intended purpose of Yahudah, the beloved of Yah, the more we will be loved by Yah in return. Now, in this light, it is interesting that the far right and the extreme left concur on one thing, as do the secular and the sectarian, even Christians and Muslims, a festering hatred for Yisra'el and Yehudim. Anti-Semitism has become part of Goyim DNA. Even progressive Jews in America have become so Goyish, they no longer support or identify with Yahudah or with Yisra'el. It has been a long, long time since anyone really listened to Yahweh. But that does not mean that God has been deaf to the anguishing pleas of his people, or that he will remain so. This reads, the yearning of the straightforward, unpretentious, and responsive, the Anah, those who are sincere and yet not esteemed within society. You have heard. Yahweh, you help shape and develop their ability to make reasoned decisions. Your ears are used to listen attentively so that you can respond appropriately. This is Psalm 10:17. And so it's quite clear that Yahweh's yearning and his is to listen to hear, to support the Anah, which is from Anah, meaning responsive. So the yearning of those who are responsive is to be heard by Yahweh. And indeed, it will happen. So whether you read this as that Yahweh will be attuned to those who are responsive to him, or those who are responsive will be attuned to Yahweh, the same result happens either way. And he says that you will help shape and develop their ability to make reasoned decisions, which is essential. Because if that does not happen, if Yahweh does not assist us in this process of developing our ability to be rational, to be thoughtful, to be judgmental, then it's all for naught. We have to think our way to God. We have to recognize that he has established boundaries, and that he has conditions for our participation in the covenant and benefits as a result of it, and that they are delivered in a very specific way through the Moed Mikre. So this reads, your ears are accustomed to listening attentively so that you can respond appropriately. Whether that's our ears or God's ears, either way, again, it's the same result. One of the many distinctions between believing and knowing really is the ability to avoid puffery and to be straightforward in our approach to God, to go where his words lead so that we might know him and understand what he's offering, expecting in return. We aren't trying to impress anyone with our faith, Yahweh included. We can be sincere in our quest for answers and forthright in our expressions of trust. And by trusting God, we can become trustworthy. Now, based upon Yah's statement, it is such people that he hears, or you could look at it the other way around, and that it is the responsive who listen to Yah. And this is ostensibly because we have an open line of communication. We may say 1,000,000 times less than those who pray without ceasing, but we convey messages that, well, please our God, such that he has every reason to pay attention to respond to those who are responsive to him. Now, we have long understood that Yahweh made us such that we could choose to be receptive to him, so that we could learn what we need to know to relate to him. Now, this realization is affirmed by the previous declaration. God designed us to be perceptive and to be discerning. That's the purpose of us having both a nephesh, a soul that can observe and respond to everything that we hear and see, but also our nesama, which gives us the ability to process that so that we can exercise good judgment regarding what we have observed. So Yahweh bestowed upon us this capacity to exercise good judgment through the nesama. And it is by listening to God that we learn how to properly respond to him. So by doing justice on behalf of the fatherless, the orphan, and the oppressed, the harassed and persecuted, no longer will mortal man strike terror upon the earth. Mizmowr, Psalm 10:18. Isn't that a lovely thought? That if we begin by Shaphat, Shaphat is such a powerful word. It means to judge. It means to make decisions. It means to exercise good judgment, to be just, right, fair, appropriate. God's testimony is the opposite of that found in the Christian New Testament. Christian New Testament said, "Judge not, lest you be judged." Well, God says the opposite. You need to shaphat. If you don't shaphat, if you don't exercise good judgment, then there is no way to know him. There's no way for the world to be moral or just. It is only when we are judgmental that morality and justice and fairness prevail. And when we do, then those who are most in need find what they need. The fatherless could be all of those who are not part of the covenant, who do not know Yahweh as their father. And the oppressed could be all of those who have not been empowered and enriched, enabled, and emancipated by Yahweh through his covenant. And the majority of people, and when the majority of people embrace these things, then mortal man, Enosh, will no longer strike terror upon the earth. This is all part of ridding the earth of the religious and the political. Get comfortable there, Wookiee. We, want you to be ready for your next introduction. So we have long recognized that for God to be just, the religious and political, the conspiratorial, and the militaristic must be exposed, they must be condemned, and they must be expunged. We have also known that they must be purged from the earth to end their reign of terror, and in order to keep those they have oppressed safe. It's not just religion, by the way, that has been so horrific. It's also politics. And the blending of the two through Babel, the commingling of religion and politics, has been the bane of humanity. It's the way that countless people, billions, have been terrorized into submission. Religion and politics are horrible things, and God wants nothing to do with them. It's always reassuring to hear Yahweh affirm these conclusions as he's done here. So in summation, just as there were no political or religious influences in Eden, their stench will not ruin the millennial kingdom either, as God restores the earth to the conditions found in the garden. Good riddance. Now, speaking of such things, and in context with our return to the garden, I've noticed a pattern that I'd like to share. And that is that in each of these Mizmowr psalms, a considerable amount of the text has been devoted to exposing Shaul, Paul, and of ridding the world of the caustic influence that he caused through Christianity and his New Testament. It is as if Dowd is announcing the subject of his final battle, or at least the final battle that we will undertake on his behalf prior to his return. Christian theologians have dismissed much of what Dowd wrote, put off by the notion that David was unnecessarily and insistently complaining against his personal enemies. But in actuality, Dowd's message is typically prophetic, explaining his fulfillment of the Moedim, including his triumphant return when he will be working with Yahowah to free his people from their most menacing enemy. He's establishing the final battle lines between right and wrong. So in the process, the first 10 Psalms systematically dismantled Christian theology and eschatology, destroying the credibility of Paul's rancid letters, along with almost everything that has been falsely attributed to the Christian man-God known as Jesus Christ. Even of the first 10 Mizmowr, each of them strives to return our focus to Yahowah, to his Torah guidance, and to his covenant family, to God's relationship with his beloved son, Dowd, and all that implies, especially to Israel and to Yehudah. Gentiles and their church aren't the answer. They are instead the problem. Somehow, either blinded or rendered irrational, Christians have completely missed this message. Every word scribed by Dowd, as David, undermines the foundation of their religion. It destroys the myths that they have attributed to their man God, and it exposes their scripture as totally fraudulent. And as goes Christianity, so falls Judaism and Islam, which would not exist without it. That's surprising. Most people think that Judaism appeared before Christianity, but it's not true. While Jews were religious, their religion is not what they practice today as Judaism. The form of Judaism, with rabbis being the most influential actors, actually developed in the late first, early second century with Rabbi Akiba, who was the founder of rabbinical Judaism. And it was developed further by Maimonides in the 11th century. And when Rabbi Akiba, established rabbinical Judaism, writing parts of the Jerusalem Talmud, his whole modus operandi was to control Jews so that they were not influenced by the false messiah of Pauline Christianity. And so he created his own false messiah in Bar Kokhba to compete with the false messiah of Christianity in Jesus. So you had two dueling false messiahs, and with the birth of both religions occurring within the same century. And the reason I say that Islam wouldn't exist without them is that Islam, the Quran, is literally nothing but an ongoing argument and a terrorist manifesto, apart from the Talmud stories that rabbis sold to Muhammad that were woven into the Quran to give it a veneer of religiosity. And without them, there is no religious tent to the Quran. It all came from the rabbis. So it is well past time that we forego every lingering aspect of eschatology and recognize that the final battle isn't Armageddon, but instead, it is the annihilation of all religious and political influences. Now, it is set up by what I call Al-Aqsa Flood 2.0. The Muslims like that term. That's what they used of October 10th of 2023, calling it Al-Aqsa Flood after the mention in the Quran. But When Yahweh describes what's going to occur as this last battle begins to metastasize, he says that the terrorists will flood into Israel in such numbers the hills themselves will be black, and that there'll be more of them than there are bullets in their guns to take down. So both the assailants and the victims have texts that speak of a flood. And so I think that that is obviously what's going to happen, that leads to Yahweh finally saying, that's it, no more. And that will occur on Taruw'ah, the 24th of September of 2033, that the attackers will all be taken out, literally incinerated, as the earth is terraformed back into the conditions of Eden. So the 10th Mizmowr psalm has been overtly condemning of Shaul Paul as the plague of death and his horrible, demeaning religion of Christianity because of its caustic influence on God's people. So this is a review of it, and that is our standard operating procedure, and we'll do that before we move on to the next Mizmowr psalm. It began, for what reason, and until when is your presence so far away, distanced and separated, Yahweh, concealed in times of drought and being cut off and restrained? 10:1 asks a question that I think Dowd likely knew the answer to. I certainly do. It's now this formal separation wasn't decreed until about 250 to 300 years after Dowd's first of three lives came to a conclusion. It's presented in the prophetic text of Hosea, where after Yahweh declares that Hosea should marry a religious whore so that he could empathize, he could sympathize with what God's had to endure with Israel, and therefore could divorce Israel for unfaithfulness, for promoting religious gods. That occurred, as I say, about 250 years after Dowd's first of three lives. And God said, I'm leaving you, and I'm not going to return until you return to me. And we now know that a significant number of Jews will not become Yehudim again and return to Yisra'el to be with Yahweh until the waning days of the time of trouble. The time of trouble begins the 22nd of May, 2026, just 90 days from now. And it lasts for 7 years, concluding on the 24th of September of 2033, the aforementioned Taruw'ah. And that's when this final remnant is prepared for Yahweh's return, and it will transpire on 10 days later on Yom Kippurim, when Yahweh returns with the Messiah and King Dowd. October 2nd, the sun sets of 2033, or 6,000 Yah. Now, there won't be a lot of Jews that are going to be receptive to this. They don't celebrate Taruw'ah. They have replaced it by the Babylonian holiday, Rosh Hashanah. They are 197 years off on their calendar, misled by Maimonides. So they're not aware that they are only 7 years away now from year 6,000 Yah. So much of this will take them by surprise. But that is the answer to this question. It says now, with arrogance, unwarranted status, and presumptuous pride, the dishonest, the condemnable, the guilty, and those inflamed with passions and burning animosity, who persecute and harass the outspoken and the unpretentious without political or religious status. It's going to be a time of great anarchy, both of action and of words. So it is a time where we're going to see unprecedented arrogance. And speaking of precedent and arrogance, of course, the ultimate arrogant president is the man who is Rahab, who is the contentious and conceited one, and Donald Trump, and he is going to be the great betrayer of Yisra'el. Let him be seized and forced to endure the evil devices that they have imagined and invented and devised. So God is saying, I want to hold them, and I will hold them accountable. I'm recording what the likes of Rahab, Donald Trump, the great betrayer, have said. And I am paying attention to the threats of the collectivists and of the Muslims and of the Christians and of the conspiratorialists and all the things that they have imagined and devised against my people. Indeed, the dishonest and fraudulent and improperly slanders and inanely boasts, arrogantly making a fool of himself based upon what his soul desires. The truth is that whether it's collectivism or conspiracy, whether it is Judaism, Islam, or Christianity, they have all made a fool of themselves. And fool here is from halal, which is Satan's name. And the one who is wrongfully severing the relationship and who inspires violence for ill-gotten gain commends this. They pretend to be a blessing while advocating that which is abhorred and condemned, despised, and rejected by Yahweh. That's the nature of religion. Religions claim that they are serving God, that their God is the God who inspired their religious scriptures, when God himself says, no, they've despised and rejected me. You won't find my name in any of those scriptural texts. You won't find my testimony there. They're filled with their way, not my way, and I find it despicable, condemnable, strictly horrible. So the deceitful one who is wrong, as if high and mighty in his lofty position, exalts in the arrogance. The most deceitful one the world will ever know is the current president of the United States, Donald Trump. He is Rahab. He is the great betrayer of Israel. And the prophets have spoken of him. We should not be denying this reality. And he is continuing to put his vassal now, Israel, in a horrible place. He does exactly what this says. He pretends to speak for them, to be someone who cares about them, who can claim that he has done things for them, and yet he is the one who is setting them up for betrayal. The prophets have never been wrong. They will not be wrong regarding Donald Trump. So you should beware that he will be the one who ultimately surrenders a terrorist state carved out of the heart of Israel, making the nation indefensible, making this time of trouble so horrific for God's people. And it says of the great copper confabulator that he will never be an honest seeker or engage in the relationship. All of his decisions, schemes, and thoughts contradict and negate God. Now, this is true certainly of Paul, the author of the Christian New Testament, but it's also true of the man who would come to be his twin, and Donald Trump. Throughout time, his way endures, replete with twisted perversions as he dances about, causing anguishing torment. Nothing has been more replete with twisted perversions than the Christian New Testament. It's only challenged in that regard by the Quran, but the Quran is so stupid that it's beneath God even commenting. Paul twisted the very testimony of God. The Quran twists the testimony of the rabbis. So one is just worse than the other. But the anguish that both have caused through those perversions is totally unacceptable to God. So your means to exercise good judgment and justly resolve disputes should be elevated high above and beyond what has taken place before, so that you know how conspicuous this blight is in Yahweh's sight. With all of his troubles and adversity, tsarar is the basis of the Eth Tsarah, the time of troubles. This is a time that we enter, as I say, in just 3 months, and it will last 7 years. Most of those who are living now won't see the end of it. So with all of his troubles and adversity, he becomes a loudmouth blowhard regarding them. The most demonic, despicable, deceitful, deadly character at this time is Rahab, is the Torahless one, is the great betrayer, is the one whom the prophets have spoken. And he is Donald Trump. I don't say that as a political pundit. I am anti-political. I have no political affiliation. I have grown, as is Yahowah, to despise politics. I don't speak as a liberal when I accuse Donald Trump as being the great betrayer, as being demonic, as being the living manifestation of Satan. I will, with almost equal aplomb, condemn the collectivism that is progressive Marxism and of the liberals. They're also dunderheads. But no one really compares to MAGA and Donald Trump in terms of taking the world to the precipice of its utter destruction. And since my responsibility is to expose this one in the last days, who will be so responsible for the destruction of the world and for the betrayal of Israel, I will continue to speak against this loud-mouthed blowhard that is the principal cause of the tsarar, the troubles and the adversity that will be endured by Israel. He has said through his reasoning, I will never be shaken, waver, or falter, be cast down or decay. Oh yeah, he's convinced that he's going to heaven, but I'm here to confirm his reservation in hell. Throughout the generations, times, and places, such that I'm never in the wrong or considered the adversary, Paul would make that claim, that he was never wrong. And yet I can't find a place where he was ever right. I had a post that I responded to on Facebook today. It was written by a group called the 119th, which I assume is an ode to the 119th Mizmowr or Psalm of Dowd, which celebrates how to observe the Torah using the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet and in alphabetical order, with 8 statements for each of those 22 letters. But if that is the truth, then they are the least thoughtful, least educated, most ignorant and irrational of all readers of that glorious psalm, because they say that it is by taking Paul's statements out of context that one mistakenly concludes that he was anti-Towrah, when in fact, in the 5 volumes of Twistianity, I review everything Paul said in his opening salvo, his letter to the Galatians, and much of what else he wrote, fully in context, analyzing every word in proximity to every other word that he wrote, and then putting that into the context of what God actually said that Paul misquoted, that I prove conclusively that when you review what Paul said in context, you will recognize that he was not just anti-Towrah, that he was anti-Yahowah, that he was anti-covenant, that he was anti-God, and that he was anti-truth, and was easily the most despicable person who ever lived. As he even admits, he was demon-possessed, but I guess the 119th didn't get far enough along into Paul's letters in context to realize that Paul not only misquoted everything that he cited from God, not even able to cite God's actual name, and he twisted it all to serve his agenda, misrepresenting God's testimony. But he never even quoted his pretense of a man God once. It's just astonishing what people will say, how mistaken people will be. The lies that you find in social media today, it is filled with them. His mouth is filled with an abundance of vile insults and injurious curses, invoking divine retribution. This would be true of Akiba, of Paul, of Muhammad, of Maimonides, of the Pope, and of course of Donald Trump. In addition, he deliberately misleads, using deceitful deceptions and perpetrating an outright fraud, treacherously betraying, along with distressful spoken statements which create a state of oppression. It is a consequence of his nauseating, evil, and corrupting tongue. Boy, I have said so many times that there is really no way to distinguish between Paul, who was a sexual pervert, who was demon-possessed, who was a confabulator, who was egomaniacal, and who was vicious towards all of his foes, perceived and real, and Donald Trump. I knew that the great betrayer was going to betray all of Paul's attributes, and he does. They are indistinguishable. And to a large degree, the personality of Muhammad and Paul also mirror that of Donald Trump. They're one and the same. It's obvious that all three men were, well, two of them have admitted already that they were demon-possessed. Paul did in his second letter to the Corinthians, and it's obvious, by the way, throughout his letters. But so did Muhammad. He did so during his first revelation, celebrating Ramadan. Then the first Ramadan, when Muhammad was in that cave and he was beat up by a dark spirit, and he tried to commit suicide because he knew he had been demon-possessed. And at the end of his life, he reaffirmed that there had always been a demon associated with him. And again, you read the Quran, and it's obvious. Look at Muhammad's life, and it's obvious. The same thing is true when you listen to what Donald Trump says and does. He's demon-possessed. Paul, Muhammad, and Donald J. Trump. He lurks in ambush openly in the courtyards of communities, while the central figure he is not easily recognized or forthcoming, seldom acknowledging or held accountable, as he kills, forestalling the lives of the innocent. This is actually speaking to the spirit behind all three of them. Satan is the central figure of every religion. He is the Hashem of Judaism. He is the Jesus of Christianity. He is the Allah of Islam. He is the inspiration of collectivism through communism, the religion of man. He simply plays people for fools. When they pray to their Lord God, they're praying to Satan. He is the central figure. He is right out in the open. He is in the mosques, in the cathedrals, in the churches, and in the synagogues. His sights are set on the unfortunate victims, waylaying them. Most of the victims of these satanic religions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and the collectivism of Marxism, they're just played for fools. They go along to get along, they believe, because, well, the society is based on these lies. And they are just waylaid. They're unfortunate victims. I'm not going to help them any, but it's better than being a perpetrator. Because if you're a perpetrator, you're going to Sheol. If you're a victim, your soul will simply cease to exist upon your mortal death. He has set a deceptive trap for humans by covertly weaving a ruse, spinning a web of lies, and intertwining a twisted snare through artifice and trickery. Well, I don't think Donald Trump could say any of those words, artifice or intertwining a twisted snare or weaving a ruse, spinning a web of lies. This is way beyond his vocabulary and certainly not going to spill off of his tongue. It does describe his confabulation. It depicts how utterly foolish, immoral, uninformed, and irrational one must be to continue to be a MAGAite and believe in his nonsense. But you have to be a fool to believe Paul. It is so obvious that he lied, so obvious that he was spinning a web of deception. And if you don't know it, then read the 5 volumes of Twistianity. If you don't know that Muhammad did the same thing, then read the 5 volumes of Goddamn Religion. If you don't know that rabbis did the same thing, then please read the 3 volumes of Babel. They all prove it. Satan is doing what was said of him in the 14th chapter of Isaiah. He has woven this web of lies, intertwining this twisted snare of artifice and trickery for the express purpose of rising above God and becoming the worshipped entity of religion. This is who he is. This is what he does. You know, the very fact that he's the God of religion should tell you all you need to know, because it's obvious when you read the Torah, the prophets, and Psalms that Yahweh damns religion, that he hates it, and that those who are religious have no relationship with him. They have no life with him. They aren't even allowed into his presence. So to be the Lord God of religion is to be anti-Yahowah. Now, it says, as we continue to read this, he has done so in a manner of ferocious and destructive, as a destructive and ferocious predator, wandering from one place to another, whose destiny is to violently pluck away from within the tents that he uses to screen his presence, cunning, commingling, and deceptively twisting everything to craftily ensnare. This is true of Paul, to a lesser degree Muhammad, because he wasn't very crafty. And it is true today of Donald Trump. You know, he wants to be the peace president, and yet he is responsible for one war after another. And ultimately, it's all going to compound into World War III and a nuclear holocaust and the near destruction of Israel. All through deception, all through twisting everything. Pretending that we're having negotiations and that we prefer making a deal when he can't wait to play chief in charge of his military. In this way, it's so amazing too that the man who received a half a dozen deferments for alleged bone spurs wants to present himself as the great patriot and hero. In this way, he seizes the oppressed and the persecuted. He abducts and he carries off those he has deprived of rights and resources by drawing them into his net to dispossess, to inherit, and to impoverish. It's true of all of them. Donald Trump today, if he draws you into his artifice, he will tear you to ribbons and essentially eat you alive as a cannibal. If there is just 1 ounce of a person pretending that, even insinuating that they're not fully in on his trickery and artifice and deceit, at just the hint of betrayal, he becomes the most vicious politician ever in the history of the world. And it is his modus operandi, and has been so for as long as he has been a public figure. This is what he does, even to his own. Satan's the same way. He's not loyal to those who worship him as Jesus or as Allah or as Hashem, or collectively under the likes of Mao and Stalin and Lenin and the like. No, he isn't. He will disinherit and impoverish those who believe him. In fact, in Islam, it's straightforward. He calls Muslims his slaves, and he tells all Muslims that they must die killing for him. Pretty obvious, isn't it? Should be obvious. Those who cower and bow down in submission, if you're bowing down, if you are worshiping, kneeling a God, your God is Satan. Those who cower and bow down in submission, hopelessly and helplessly bowing their heads, he crushes, he destroys, he disparages, he pummels. That's the key message all the way through the Quran, where Hasatan is unmasked. He is Satan being Satan. Treated as inferior, his victims fall by the multitudes associated with him. If you're among those who are religious, you will go down with your religion. It won't save you, but it will condemn you. From his disposition and inclination, he says, God isn't mindful. He no longer responds appropriately, and thus he should be ignored. Forgetful, he should be forgotten, because he can no longer be found. This is Paul's modus operandi as he condemned the Torah as pornography, as he said that the Torah could not save, that God had been a cruel taskmaster, and that his gospel of grace was needed to replace it. Well, there are billions who believe him. But sadly for them, it's they who will not be observed or seen in God's presence. You and I are in agreement that you must take a stand, Yahweh. You have decided to lift up your hand, God. You will never overlook or forget those who have been demeaned, impoverished, and persecuted. This is why there must be divine retribution. God must lash out at those who have created and promoted the religions of Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and collectivism because of the consequence of these religions and how they have demeaned, impoverished, and persecuted his people and others. On what basis and for what reason does the fraudulent one who is wrong about engaging in religious malfeasance discredit and renounce, contradict, and negate God? Religions are all anti-God. They don't lead to God, they lead away from God. They don't please God, they annoy God. Based upon his inclinations, he says, you will not care about or account for this. Well, they would be wrong. God will. And that accounting is coming soon. However, you do see for yourself the effort that is put forward to create perversions causing trouble and misery. God has to maintain any sense of justice, to be credible, to be dependable, to be reliable. He must persecute, prosecute, condemn those whose religions have harmed his people: Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and collectivism. And you do consider these as annoying provocations. The Dowd wrote, and he's right. Therefore, taking into your hands for yourself those who remain and who have renounced their prior affiliations. This is the only way that you can have a relationship with God, is to renounce any prior affiliation with a political party or a religious faith. When you do that, and you also renounce your conspiracies, then you're in a position to embrace Yahweh's hand. Those have been victimized and the fatherless, you exist to aid and support. Your will is to crush the leadership capabilities of this shepherd and the outreach of the deceitful one who is wrong, and the religious as well. This one who, by being a loudmouth, evil countryman, severs the relationship through improper means, accounting for his fraudulent religious malfeasance, until you find that there is nothing left to be uncovered. God's going to continue to eradicate all traces of religion, conspiracy, politics, and collectivism from the planet, beginning the evening of Taruw'ah, September 23rd, as it goes into the Shabbat of September 24th of 2033, annihilating all who would bear those proclivities: religion, conspiracy, politics, collectivism, anti-Semitism. They must all go for Yisra'el to live. They must all be expunged for Yahowah and Dowd to return. They must be eliminated for God to restore the earth to the conditions enjoyed during Gan Eden. So Yahowah reigns by guiding forever as an eternal witness. He sets the example for the odd, the restoring witness to the eternal testimony to follow, as a malak, as one who leads through counsel forever, from antiquity and into the future. Gentile institutions, therefore, will be expelled. They're going to cease to exist from his land and from the earth. You're going to need to be associated with Yisra'el if you're going to be among the survivors. The yearning of the straightforward, unpretentious, and responsive, you've heard. If you respond to God, God will respond to you. It's shub for shub or no shub for you. Yahowah, you help shape and develop their ability to make reasoned decisions. Your ears are used to listen attentively so that you can respond appropriately. It's just as return to God and he will return to you, shub for shub. It is the same here. Those who are responsive to Yahowah, Yahowah will respond to them. By doing justice on behalf of and defending Shaphat, the fatherless and the oppressed, well, they will no longer be terrorized by mortal man upon the land or the earth. It's marvelous, isn't it, that we recognize that we have come through 6,000 years of every human civilization, nation, and large institution terrorizing, deceiving, robbing, oppressing, all within their reach, through religion, through politics, through conspiracy, militarism, anti-Semitism. But it's all coming to an end. And we are on the cusp of happily ever after. The next 7 years are going to be hellacious. But at the end of that time, there will be the great awakening, the great purging of the mortal remnant of Yisra'el, of a return of select goyim, of a opportunity to return to the garden, to live with Yahowah, to demonstrate that we really can be observant, responsive, and responsible. And I look forward to being there with you to help guide you to this place so that you can enjoy that outcome along with us. So I thank you for listening. We'll continue our next program by considering the very Psalms of Dowd. We're going to move into, as you might expect, the 11th, now that we have presented and considered the 10th. And with every step along the way, with each word that is laid down for our consideration, we come ever closer to Yahowah, our God. Again, thank you for listening. Good day.
Hey there, thanks for tuning in. That was Fetch. Gotta run now. Catch y'all on our next podcast.